and it was, it always holds a special place in my heart for that reason. And number five, I'll say the WWE's version of the ECW title. I always thought it was different. It would look different. It looked, but not in a bad way. It looked cool. It looked.
Maybe the original, because then didn't they later have like a silver title that just had the letters ECW
Yeah,
on it?
that's the one I meant. The one that Christian had.
Right, because I think originally they just had like the same or a remake of the same title, and then they switched somewhere along the way.
Yeah, yeah. It was around the time that Christian was the champion. I always really liked that belt, and I thought it looked good. I thought it was a good update, and it looked different, but not like lesser, which was nice. Okay, so again, this is going to be the one that we're going to sort of sit here and think about a little bit more, I think. But we'll close out with the top five favorite wrestlers of all time, and it's whatever criteria you want to use. So, what's one of your five, Luke?
The first guy that comes to mind whenever I'm asked this, and it's he's probably not my favorite wrestler of all time, but it's always Big Van Vader for me. I love Vader. I think he's had a series of great matches. I love the character work. I love the backstory of, he's from the Rocky Mountains and he went over to Japan and he assumed this character and he's got this secret mask that has special powers and all these sorts of things. He's a 450-pound guy. He's doing moonsaults and there's just nobody really that's been like him
Yeah.
before. Nobody since that's really quite the same thing. He's a bit of a hard-hitting, stiff, almost ruthlessly so. Probably not fun to be in the ring with him. But it looks incredibly real because he's so stiff. But at the same time, he's got this cartoonish sort of Japanese character thing going on mixed with being a mountain man. And it's always just been so eclectic to me. And as a kid, I was legitimately afraid of Vader. When he was the number one contender in 1995, I thought he was going to demolish Hulk Hogan as a kid. I still wish maybe they could have done that. They could have built him up to be bigger. I regret the way he was handled in the World Wrestling Federation. But that's life, and I think Vader just doesn't get the treatment that he's worthy of. And the matches hold up today, so I'm going to go with Vader.
Vader's a good pick. He was never one of my favorites, but like I've seen some of the stuff that he's done since, and it's like I didn't engage with it in the same way that you would have, but always did enjoy his matches. For me, I'm gonna go with one of my absolute favorites of all time, and like mine's gonna be a bit of like, hey, your WWF centric fandom is showing. But I'm gonna have to start with one of the guys who made me want to start watching wrestling. It was when it was first cool, and that's the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. You want to talk about a guy who could have a match with anybody and make them look good. You want to talk about a guy who could get on the microphone and talk you into the building. Was at the top of the company during some of the toughest years in the company's existence, but also got to launch sort of one of the biggest stables in professional wrestling history in DX, and then looked like he was never going to wrestle again. Comes back and has a better back half of his career, and has two of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time under his belt. Like, he is one of the greatest of all time, and definitely one of my top five favorite wrestlers.
Yeah, well, in the second run is kind of what makes it. Like, he comes back and then he has another decade where he's a top guy, if not the top guy. And those two WrestleMania matches, the Undertaker ones are great, but I mean the Flair one is incredible. And I mean, just the series he had with Chris Jericho is incredible. And the WrestleMania 19 match with Jericho is incredible. So there's a bunch of different iterations, and throughout the years, there's different vintages of Shawn Michaels. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that like his early work is great too, like with the Rockers and his stuff outside of the WWF prior to that. And as Intercontinental Champion, like he had all of these different versions, and all of them are Hall of Fame worthy. There's probably 6 or 7 different vintages of Shawn Michaels that are truly transcendently great.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So number 4 for you.
Segues pretty well for me because it's along the same lines, and for me it's Ric Flair. I mean, Ric Flair, like you said, he have a great match with anybody. The longevity is unparalleled, and just the variety of opponents. In 1989 alone, and when I first got the WWE Network, I made good use of it. And in 1989 alone, Ric Flair has what I would call 5-star matches with 3 entirely different opponents, 3 different types of matches. He has a trilogy with Ricky Steamboat. I mean, they actually wrestled each other something like 200 times that year. But famously, there's a trilogy that was on pay-per-view. He also has a 5-star match with Terry Funk in an I Quit kind of no-holds-barred brawl. And he has a 5-star match with Sting as well in 1989. All of them different. He works more of a baby face in the Terry Funk match, and they brawl. He has this technical wrestling classic with Steamboat, and then he plays kind of a cowardly heel up against the babyface powerhouse in Sting. So in that year alone, you can see the variety of matches. Now you can obviously go earlier, you can go later, all the way up to his what I still consider to be his retirement against Shawn Michaels. I think that was a great match. And there's stuff that probably predates the WWE Network that he was doing in the early 80s and even late 70s that I assume is also just as good if he was good enough to be made the NWA World Champion later on down the road. So yeah, for me for sure.
And like it's hard to say that he's not one of the absolute greatest of all time. I'm just gonna go ahead and agree with you, and I'm gonna put him on my list. I'll list one, so it's not you talking back here. But definitely Ric Flair belongs on my list as well. So I guess my number 3 is sort of along the same lines. As a guy could have a different kind of match with anybody that he wanted to get into the ring with. And you would see that in the first ever pay-per-view presentation of King of the Ring, defeating Razor Ramon, Mr. Perfect, and Bam Bam Bigelow, Bret the Hitman Hart, man. And like he was at the top of the heap just as I was getting into wrestling, and then the screw job happens, and he goes over to WCW. But Bret Hart, like he was the most popular, greatest wrestler in the world when I was a kid, and then I find out not only is he the WWF champion, but he's also Canadian. Like he's a national hero. I think that there's some kind of law that if you see Earl Hebner in public here in Canada, you have to scream at him that he screwed Bret. I'm pretty sure that's on the books somewhere. It's just like Bret Hart could have a match with absolutely anyone, and it would be amazing. And I think back to him having the series that he had with Owen, that match for the Intercontinental title against Mr. Perfect, like his matches against Flair, his matches against Yoko were good. Like against Yokozuna, who's this enormous, quote unquote Japanese, quote unquote sumo wrestler, and he was able to get this 400 to 500 pound man to a really good match. So Bret Hart, absolutely with a bullet, number 3 for me.
I would agree with you, but I'm going to try to give some variety here. I'm trying to get away from childhood heroes, just because I know I'll just name like 5 guys from 80s, 90s WCW, and that might not be fair because there is other wrestling that exists that's great. So I'm going to go with my current favorite wrestler, and that's Cesaro. I love Cesaro. I have ever since I first saw his stuff. I think thanks to you, he showed me some of his Shakara stuff. when he was in the Los Ice Creams. And I believe you also showed me some of his Ring of Honor stuff at the time when he was ROH Tag Team Champion. But upon his arrival in the WWE, I immediately was like, this is my favorite guy. He should be the world champion. I love his ring work. I love all the characters he's played. I just love the way that he moves around the ring. His timing seems impeccable. His footwork, I'm always impressed by what he's able to do in tight spaces. He could probably wrestle a match like in a phone booth. And he's just so impressive. And I think it will age well. I believe that there are brighter things ahead for him, whether that is the WWE coming to terms with the obvious talent that they have, or frankly, if he chose to go elsewhere. I think if you see the level of success some of these guys have had outside of the world of the McMahons, I do think that a guy like Cesaro could easily go, draw money as a Ring of Honor World Champion or somewhere near the top of the card with New Japan, in the way that Kenny Omega or an AJ Styles has been able to transcend that. So I'm going to put Cesaro on that list.
For sure, man, for sure. And like just freakishly strong. That's the other thing that you gotta like underline, is just like the feats of strength that guy does. Like he's a pretty unassuming character. Like he's cut, don't get me wrong, but like he like just deadlifts things that he shouldn't be able to deadlift. Like it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. I'm gonna take a page out of your book here. I'm gonna take the cue from you and go with one of my current favorites. Get away from the nostalgia and go with one of my current favorites, and to my mind one of the absolute best in the world right now. And that's the current, as we're recording this, WWE champion, AJ Styles. I've been lucky enough to see AJ Styles wrestle in person here in Halifax. I actually saw an AJ Styles versus Christopher Daniels match here in Halifax, which is kind of weird to think about now that I think about it. But just his work is amazing, and like he's somehow had this body of work that he's doing all these crazy moves. Of course, he had a very successful run in TNA, and then parlayed that into a successful independence and Japanese wrestling run, and now he's running in the WWE, and just you think about the fact that like the guy is putting together some of his best work, and he's 40. Like he looks, acts, moves like a man who's half his age, but he's 40 years old. And like the thing is that I could see him having another 10, maybe even 15 years competing. Maybe not at this level, but like he could keep going, because he's just that damn good. And I would trust him also to be able to innovate his moveset to mean that he could keep on going and could have a long and fruitful career. And just some of the stuff that he does is just creative, innovative, and amazing. And he's AJ friggin' Styles, baby. Like, he's the best.
I think it's a great choice. And just to build on your point, like, I think that the changes that have happened, I mean, in the wrestling industry, but also in society, where people are more aware of aging and, just the toll that certain things take on your body is going to be positive for a guy like AJ. Like, he's approaching 40 years old. Like you said, he looks like he might be 30. And a lot of that is like, you're not wrestling as many dates as you used to. You're also wrestling a different style. And yes, he has taken a lot of bumps, don't get me wrong, but it's not unprotected chair shots to the head. It's not you're wrestling at 10 o'clock at night in Chicago and then, 1 p.m. the next day in Minneapolis and then in Fargo the next night. And then, like back in the day where guys aged really quickly and they're using all sorts of different pain medicines and things. Like, this is I'm not saying that their job is easy, but TNA certainly a lighter schedule, Japan a lighter schedule, and even now in the WWE, it's a match on Friday,